Gerald Blake was a man who embodied power in its most unapologetic form. A self-made millionaire, his success was built on a foundation of relentless ambition and a willingness to crush any obstacle in his path. His wealth was displayed proudly throughout his grand mansion: polished marble floors, glittering chandeliers, expensive art, and lavish furnishings all testified to the empire he had built. But beneath the gleaming surface of his luxurious life was a man whose sense of entitlement extended far beyond money. Gerald believed he was entitled to control everything around him, especially the people who worked in his household. Among those people was Maya, the maid. Young, black, and quietly resilient, Maya moved through Gerald's mansion like a shadow, always present but seldom acknowledged. She was the backbone of the home's upkeep, the unseen force that made sure the opulence remained untarnished. Maya's work was meticulous, and she carried out her duties with a kindness and quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with the harsh world she inhabited. Years of subtle prejudice and condescension had hardened Maya in ways that weren't immediately visible. Gerald's remarks about her background, his dismissive tone whenever she spoke, and the way he treated her like an invisible accessory to his success all chipped away at her spirit. Yet, Maya endured it all in silence, preferring to keep her head down rather than provoke further disdain. Survival in Gerald's world meant knowing when to speak and when to retreat. On this particular evening, Gerald was preparing to host one of his lavish dinner parties, a gathering of business associates and wealthy elites whose presence reinforced his status. The house buzzed with the energy of anticipation: chefs in the kitchen, servers arranging the dining room, and Maya moving quietly through the shadows, ensuring every detail was flawless. Gerald took special pleasure in these events. They were opportunities not just to network and close deals but to display his power in every conceivable way. His guests admired the grandeur of his home and, unknowingly or not, participated in the subtle hierarchy he enforced. Maya, of course, was meant to be invisible, seen only when needed, heard only when spoken to. As the guests arrived, the mansion filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of conversation. Gerald greeted each visitor with a practiced charm that masked his ruthless nature. But his attention always returned to the staff, and most pointedly, to Maya. At one point during the evening, as Maya discreetly refilled a guest's glass, Gerald made a pointed comment loud enough for several people to hear. His words were sharp, belittling Maya's background and suggesting that her presence in the mansion was nothing more than a product of her limited options. The laughter that followed was cold and empty, a chorus of complicity in the subtle humiliation. Maya's face betrayed nothing: no anger, no embarrassment, just the calm restraint she had perfected over years of such encounters. Yet beneath her composed exterior, the sting of the insult burned fiercely. She felt the weight of the room's eyes, the invisible line that separated her from the world of privilege and power that Gerald inhabited. Throughout the dinner, Gerald continued his veiled mockery, each comment a small cut meant to remind Maya of her place. To the guests, it was mere entertainment, a display of superiority that reinforced their shared social status. But for Maya, it was a brutal reminder of the walls she faced every day. Despite the humiliation, Maya's spirit remained unbroken. She understood that this was more than just a party, it was a battleground where the dynamics of power played out with cruel precision. And for the first time, beneath the quiet strength she had always carried, a spark of defiance began to grow. As the evening wore on, the tension between Gerald's arrogance and Maya's resilience escalated. In a particularly public moment, Gerald mocked her in front of everyone, pushing the boundaries of decency and respect. The guests laughed, some nervously, others with genuine amusement, but Maya's eyes held a steady, unyielding fire. That moment marked a turning point. The humiliation that had always been met with silence now felt unbearable. Deep inside, Maya made a quiet but profound decision to no longer accept the invisibility imposed upon her. She resolved to change the dynamic, not with loud confrontation, but with a steadfast refusal to be diminished any longer. The chapter closes on Maya's silent resolve, the flicker of courage in her eyes signaling the beginning of a journey that would challenge Gerald's authority and the rigid social order of his world. The lavish mansion, once a symbol of unchecked power and entitlement, was about to witness a shift one sparked by the strength and dignity of the woman who had long been invisible but never defeated. The dinner party was in full swing, the grand dining room alive with chatter, clinking glasses, and the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The guests, a mix of influential figures and socialites, basked in the opulence that the household so carefully projected. At the center of this spectacle was Gerald, the master of ceremonies, who thrived on attention and control. He moved among his guests with practiced ease, his every word designed to impress and assert dominance. Maya had been part of this world for years, though always on its fringes. As the household's maid, she was accustomed to the invisible walls that separated her from the privileged lives unfolding just beyond her reach. She moved quietly, performing her duties with a measured efficiency, bearing the casual slights and veiled insults that came with her position. She had learned to carry the weight of disrespect without complaint, wearing her silence like armor. But tonight, the usual boundaries began to blur. Gerald, in an effort to entertain and amuse his guests, seized an opportunity to belittle Maya publicly. With a forced smile and a voice dripping with condescension, he ordered her to perform menial tasks right there at the dining table, fetching drinks, straightening silverware, and wiping crumbs from the guests' plates. His crude remarks about her appearance and intelligence echoed around the room, met with laughter that cut through Maya like a blade. The humiliation was unbearable, yet Maya held herself still. For years, she had endured moments like this, each one a quiet wound she bore alone. But something inside her began to shift, a slow, simmering fire that grew with each jeer and sneer. The laughter, the mockery, the blatant disregard, it all coalesced into a moment of clarity. This was not merely about a single evening's insult, it was about a lifetime of being seen as less, as invisible, as nothing more than a servant to the whims of those who looked down on her. The room seemed to shrink around Maya, the weight of all the years pressing down, but instead of breaking, she found her voice. It was steady, clear, and filled with a quiet power that startled everyone present. She refused to continue being subjected to such disrespect. Her words were simple but resolute, cutting through the laughter and forcing a sudden, awkward silence. Gerald's shock was immediate. His smug smile faltered, replaced by disbelief. He attempted to dismiss her defiance as a mere outburst, trying to reassert his authority with bluster and threats. His voice grew louder, filled with rage, as he warned her that she could be fired on the spot for insolence. But Maya did not waver. Her calmness in the face of his fury was disarming. She stood her ground, unmoved by his bluster, her silence between words conveying a strength that words alone could not. The guests, initially caught between amusement and discomfort, now found themselves unsure of how to react. The power dynamic in the room had shifted in a heartbeat. The atmosphere thickened with tension, the earlier gaiety replaced by an uneasy stillness. Gerald's anger, once a spectacle, now felt hollow in the face of Maya's quiet resilience. In a final act of frustration, Gerald abruptly ended the dinner party, dismissing his guests with a curt wave. The abruptness of his exit left the room charged with unspoken questions and a newfound awareness. Maya's internal transformation had begun, marked by this refusal to remain silent. She had shattered the carefully constructed illusion of control that Gerald and, by extension, the household had maintained for so long. This moment was more than a personal victory, it was the start of a new power dynamic within the house. Maya's defiance challenged the established order, signaling to everyone, staff and guests alike, that the era of unquestioned submission was over. Her voice, once suppressed, had become a force that demanded recognition and respect. As the evening wound down, Maya felt a surge of something she had not experienced before: empowerment. The burden of years lifted slightly from her shoulders, replaced by a cautious hope. Though the path ahead remained uncertain and fraught with challenges, this breaking of silence was the first step toward reclaiming her dignity and reshaping her place in a world that had long ignored her worth. The chapter closes on this pivotal shift: Maya standing tall amidst the ruins of old hierarchies, ready to navigate the new reality she had begun to forge. The silence she once wore like armor had been broken, revealing a voice that could no longer be ignored. Maya's quiet defiance slowly begins to ripple through the atmosphere of the household. No longer willing to silently accept the subtle insults and dismissive glances that had once passed unnoticed, she starts to assert herself in small but meaningful ways. Her actions are deliberate, carefully measured, not outright rebellion, but enough to signal a shift in the balance of power. She holds her head higher, refuses to immediately respond to degrading commands, and sets boundaries in ways that unsettle those around her. These small acts of courage create a new tension that Gerald, the head of the household, cannot ignore. Gerald, a man accustomed to unquestioned authority, is taken aback by Maya's changing demeanor. His control, once absolute, now feels challenged, and he struggles to regain his grip. But pride and stubbornness prevent him from acknowledging any weakness. Rather than reconsidering his harsh treatment or reflecting on Maya's growing spirit, he doubles down on his efforts to intimidate and dominate. He increases her workload, piling on difficult, demeaning tasks designed to exhaust her physically and mentally. His hope is that under the weight of relentless pressure, Maya will break, returning to the compliant figure he once commanded. This escalating cruelty, however, only strengthens Maya's resolve. The humiliation and exploitation she endures ignite a fierce determination to reclaim her dignity. She realizes that submission is not her only option. There is a precarious but growing space where she can assert control, even in small ways. These moments of quiet rebellion become acts of resistance. Whether it's withholding certain services or subtly undermining Gerald's authority through calculated delays or silent refusals, Maya finds ways to push back without drawing outright confrontation. Gerald, initially confused by these subtle disruptions, becomes increasingly unsettled. The certainty that once defined his rule is slipping through his fingers. Each act of defiance, though minor, chips away at his confidence and fuels a growing paranoia. He tries to identify the source of this unrest, but Maya's cautious approach makes it difficult to pin down. His attempts to tighten control only deepen the fissures in the household dynamic, heightening the stakes for both of them. Amid this escalating tension, Maya's inner world undergoes a profound transformation. The small victories she claims feed a burgeoning belief in her own strength and potential. What once seemed like survival through silence evolves into a fight for recognition and respect. She begins to envision a future beyond the confines of servitude, a life where she is no longer defined by her subjugation. This turning point is crystallized when Maya receives an unexpected letter from an old acquaintance, someone who has long recognized her potential and believes in her ability to rise above her circumstances. The letter serves as a lifeline, a reminder of her worth and a call to action. It rekindles hope and awakens a deep-seated ambition that had lain dormant beneath years of hardship. The letter's message resonates with Maya on a profound level. It challenges her to reconsider what she thought was possible and to see herself not as a victim, but as a person capable of change and influence. This realization marks a pivotal moment in her journey, one where revenge and redemption are no longer distant concepts but immediate possibilities that hinge on the choices she makes next. With newfound clarity, Maya begins to plot her course. She understands that the path ahead is fraught with risk, but she is no longer willing to remain invisible or powerless. The subtle defiance that had kept her afloat now becomes the foundation for a bolder strategy, a plan to reclaim her agency and rewrite her story on her own terms. The chapter closes with Maya standing at the crossroads of transformation. Her defiance has already begun to unsettle the established order, and the support from her mentor's letter ignites a flame of ambition and hope. She is no longer the silent servant, she is becoming a force to be reckoned with, ready to confront the challenges ahead with courage and determination. The question remains whether she will choose the path of revenge, seeking to dismantle the power that oppresses her, or redemption, aiming to rise above the pain and build a new life defined by dignity and self-worth. Either way, the stakes have never been higher, and Maya's fight is only just beginning. Maya's life had always been confined within the walls of Gerald's sprawling estate, her role defined by the endless chores and invisible expectations of a maid. Yet, beneath her quiet exterior, she harbored a keen intellect and an acute understanding of people, skills cultivated from years of observing the powerful and privileged who passed through those ornate halls. It was these hidden talents that caught the attention of Sophia, an enigmatic woman with a storied past tied closely to Gerald. Sophia's reputation preceded her. Once Gerald's confidant and partner in business ventures, she had severed ties after witnessing the corrosive effects of his toxic behavior. Now distant but watchful, she saw in Maya a spark, something raw and untapped that could shift the balance of power within the household. When their paths crossed unexpectedly at a charity gala, Sophia extended an offer that surprised Maya, an invitation to rise beyond the confines of her current status, to harness her inherent abilities and reshape her destiny. At first, the proposition felt overwhelming. Maya had spent so long existing in the background that the idea of stepping into a more influential role was daunting. But Sophia's confidence in her was contagious. She encouraged Maya to see herself not as a servant, but as a strategist, someone capable of navigating complex social webs and influencing outcomes without overt confrontation. With Sophia's guidance, Maya began to test the waters. She started paying closer attention to the nuances of interaction within the household, noticing how small gestures, carefully placed words, and silent observations could shift perceptions and decisions. She learned to read Gerald's moods, anticipating his reactions and adapting her behavior to either soothe his temper or subtly undermine his authority without raising suspicion. Gradually, Maya's presence evolved. Where once she had been invisible, now she commanded quiet attention. She chose her moments carefully, interjecting with thoughtful comments during conversations with guests, or subtly steering discussions in directions favorable to her aims. Her understanding of human nature, who craved approval, who feared exposure, who sought power, became a tool she wielded with precision. Gerald, for all his arrogance and control, remained oblivious to these shifts. He dismissed Maya's earlier defiance as a fleeting irritation, confident that she remained under his dominion. But as weeks passed, her growing confidence unsettled him. He noticed how she maintained composure in tense moments, how she managed interactions with a calm assurance that defied her station. The true turning point came one evening during a lavish dinner party. Gerald had invited a prominent investor, someone whose favor could secure his next lucrative deal. Maya observed the dynamics at play, sensing the underlying tensions that Gerald failed to acknowledge. Seizing an opportunity, she subtly guided the conversation toward a sensitive topic, allowing Gerald's mask to slip in front of the guest. With deft timing, Maya asked a seemingly innocent question that triggered Gerald's defensiveness. His response was sharp and revealing an unguarded glimpse into the manipulative and ruthless nature that he typically concealed. The guest's reaction was telling, the veneer of respect cracked, replaced by a wary distance. Maya's maneuver was so subtle that none in the room immediately recognized her orchestration. Yet, the impact was unmistakable. Gerald's confidence wavered as he realized the carefully constructed image he projected was unraveling, and that Maya was no longer just a background figure but a player in the game. The aftermath left Gerald unsettled. He struggled to maintain his authority, but the foundation beneath him was shifting. Maya's quiet rise had begun to unsettle the household's power dynamics, planting the seeds of his eventual downfall. Meanwhile, Maya herself embraced her newfound role with a mixture of determination and caution, aware that every move carried risks but also immense potential. This moment marked a profound transformation not just in Maya's circumstances, but in her self-perception. No longer confined by her title, she stepped into her own power, understanding that influence did not always come from wealth or position, but from insight, strategy, and the courage to change the narrative. The game had changed, and Maya was ready to play on her terms. The once steady balance of power between Maya and Gerald begins to shift, though the change is hardly visible at first. Gerald, a man accustomed to control and dominance, starts to unravel under the mounting pressures that surround him. His frustration, long simmering beneath a polished exterior, finally erupts in sharp bursts of anger and impatience, alienating those closest to him. His business dealings, once flourishing under his iron grip, falter unexpectedly, leaving associates puzzled and competitors emboldened. Maya, previously perceived as a quiet presence within the household, subtly intensifies her influence. She operates in the shadows, carefully planting seeds that grow into significant obstacles for Gerald. Through anonymous leaks of sensitive information to his rivals, she orchestrates a series of financial setbacks that weaken his standing in the business world. These leaks, precise and calculated, strike at the heart of Gerald's empire, disrupting contracts and eroding trust among his partners. As the consequences of these actions accumulate, Gerald's attempts to contain the damage only exacerbate his unraveling. His responses become increasingly erratic outbursts that strain relationships, impulsive decisions that further destabilize his ventures. The control he once wielded over both his household and his business empire begins to slip through his fingers like sand. The once impenetrable facade of strength shows visible cracks, and those around him start to question his leadership. In the midst of this turmoil, Maya grows more resolute. Her actions are no longer solely about retaliation, they become a means of reclaiming her agency. The oppressive system that had constrained her, both within the household and society at large, begins to feel less formidable as she takes the reins of her own destiny. This empowerment fuels her determination, driving her to push forward despite the risks and challenges. Yet the journey is not without its personal costs. Maya confronts her own doubts and fears, uncertainties about the sustainability of her path and the consequences it might bring. The pressure of maintaining secrecy, the weight of her actions, and the fear of what might happen if her identity is uncovered weigh heavily on her. There are moments of isolation and introspection, where she questions whether the price of her newfound power is worth the sacrifices it demands. The chapter also explores the nuanced nature of Maya's transformation. Her growing strength does not erase the vulnerability beneath, rather, it coexists with it, creating a complex portrait of a woman who is both fighter and survivor. This internal conflict adds depth to her character, illustrating that liberation is often a complicated and painful process, not merely a triumphant victory. Meanwhile, Gerald's downfall accelerates. The culmination of financial losses and damaged relationships reaches a critical point when he loses a major contract, an event that sends shockwaves through his business network. This loss is not just a financial blow, it symbolizes the crumbling of the foundation upon which his power was built. It marks the beginning of a steep decline, a fall from grace that seems inevitable given the momentum of his unraveling. Gerald's reaction to this setback is telling. Rather than inspiring a recalibration or a strategic response, it plunges him deeper into despair and desperation. His erratic behavior intensifies, and his grip on reality loosens further. The control he once exercised with such confidence is replaced by fear and uncertainty, leaving him vulnerable to further exploitation and loss. The chapter ends on this note of transformation and consequence. Maya, having disrupted the balance of power, stands at a crossroads, her future uncertain but her resolve unwavering. Gerald, meanwhile, faces the fallout of his diminishing influence and the tangible threat of financial ruin. The shifting dynamics between them set the stage for the battles yet to come, underscoring the costs of ambition, revenge, and the pursuit of freedom. This complex interplay of power and vulnerability, control and rebellion, frames the emotional and psychological landscape of the chapter. It reveals that the fall from grace is as much an internal struggle as an external event, and that healing and empowerment often arise from the ashes of destruction and loss. Maya's journey is emblematic of this truth, highlighting the resilience required to break free and the uncertainty that accompanies such profound change. Gerald's descent accelerated rapidly as the pillars that once supported his dominance began to crumble. The vast wealth and influence he had amassed, which had long shielded him from accountability, now seemed fragile and transient. The invincibility he had enjoyed for so long was unraveling, and with it, his grip on control slipped through his fingers. His attempts to regain power grew frantic and increasingly erratic. He reverted to the old tactics that had served him in the past: manipulation, intimidation, and coercion, but these methods, once effective, now fell flat against Maya's steadfast resolve. Maya had changed. The fear and submission Gerald once relied upon were gone. Where once she might have been easily silenced or coerced, she now stood firm, her spirit hardened by experience and conviction. This reversal unsettled Gerald profoundly. Every effort to destabilize her backfired, further exposing his vulnerabilities. His power plays became desperate moves in a game where the rules no longer favored him, and his confidence began to erode beneath the weight of his failures. The instability in Gerald's life extended beyond professional setbacks. Personal relationships that had once been sources of strength or alliances turned cold or fractured under the strain of his unraveling influence. Those who had once flattered or feared him now distanced themselves, sensing his decline. The isolation deepened his despair, forcing him into uncomfortable reflections on his own actions and the legacy he was leaving behind. For the first time, Gerald was confronted not only with external defeat but with the stark reality of his own arrogance and prejudice, the very traits that had driven his rise and now hastened his fall. This confrontation with self was painful and disorienting. Gerald wrestled with the consequences of years spent wielding power without regard for those he oppressed, especially Maya. The harsh truth about the damage he had inflicted slowly pierced through his defenses. Yet, amidst the turmoil, there was a flicker of something unfamiliar, a tentative awareness of his own human flaws and a possibility for change. Whether this realization would lead to genuine redemption or deeper resentment remained uncertain, as the battle for control still raged within him. Meanwhile, Maya faced her own complex challenges. Her rise in influence was undeniable, but with it came a heavy burden. The power she now held over Gerald's fate was both a tool and a test. Maya found herself grappling with conflicting emotions: anger and justice on one hand, and empathy and forgiveness on the other. The desire to hold Gerald accountable was strong, yet she also recognized the humanity beneath his arrogance and cruelty. This awareness complicated her path forward, casting doubt on whether vengeance was truly the answer. Maya's internal conflict deepened as she reflected on her journey. She had fought hard to reclaim her voice and dignity, but the struggle had left scars and raised questions about the cost of her actions. Could justice be served without perpetuating cycles of pain and retribution? Was there room for healing and reconciliation, even with someone like Gerald? These questions haunted her, challenging the simplistic narratives of good versus evil that had once guided her thinking. This chapter captures the nuanced emotional landscape Maya navigated, her strength and resolve tempered by compassion and introspection. It explores the complexity of power dynamics, showing that those who fight oppression often wrestle not only with their adversaries but also with their own desires and moral boundaries. Maya's growing influence was not just about defeating Gerald, it was about defining what kind of change she wanted to bring about. As the chapter draws to a close, Maya stands at a pivotal moment. She recognizes the profound responsibility that comes with her newfound power, the ability to determine Gerald's future, whether through destruction or redemption. This realization weighs heavily on her, emphasizing that the choice she makes will shape not only Gerald's fate but also her own legacy. The power she wields is formidable, yet it demands careful consideration and wisdom. Maya understands that wielding power with fire could mean continuing the cycle of conflict and retribution, but choosing a different path might open the possibility for transformation and healing. This decision is fraught with uncertainty, as it challenges her to rise above past hurts and embrace a vision that transcends simple victory. The chapter ends with Maya poised on the edge of this critical choice, aware that the true battle lies not in the external fight with Gerald, but in the deeper struggle within herself to determine what justice and mercy truly mean. In this moment of clarity, Maya's evolution is evident. She is no longer just a victim or a fighter reacting to injustice, she has become a figure capable of shaping outcomes with intention and depth. Her journey reflects the complexities of power, the cost of conflict, and the possibility of redemption even in the face of profound betrayal. This chapter leaves readers with a powerful message, that true strength often involves restraint, reflection, and the courage to choose a path that heals rather than destroys. Maya's mind raced with every detail as she crafted her final plan. The decision to confront Gerald publicly wasn't made lightly, it was the culmination of months of endurance, frustration, and quiet strategizing. Gerald's behavior had left scars not just on her, but on many others who had suffered in silence. His arrogance, his prejudices, and his refusal to take responsibility had to be addressed in a way that left no room for denial or dismissal. Maya knew that a private confrontation wouldn't be enough this time. Gerald needed to face the consequences where it mattered most, in front of those who had witnessed his unchecked power and influence. Her approach required patience and precision. The event she chose was a significant gathering of industry professionals, colleagues, and acquaintances, all people whose opinions Gerald valued, perhaps too much. It was a setting ripe for exposure, where the social stakes were high, and reputations could be made or broken. Maya recognized that to dismantle Gerald's carefully constructed facade, she had to control the narrative and the timing. The element of surprise would be crucial. Gerald's confidence stemmed largely from his ignorance of the full extent of Maya's resolve. In the weeks leading up to the event, Maya worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She connected with others who had been affected by Gerald's actions, quietly building a coalition of support. Their shared stories and evidence would serve as undeniable proof during the confrontation. Maya also studied Gerald's routines and personality, anticipating how he might react when challenged publicly. This knowledge allowed her to craft a strategy that balanced directness with subtlety. She intended to strip away his arrogance, but without giving him a platform to deflect or manipulate the situation. Despite her careful planning, Maya understood that the emotional toll of such a confrontation would be immense. She grappled with the fear of backlash, the uncertainty of how others might respond, and the personal vulnerability of standing up so boldly. But the desire for justice and closure outweighed these fears. Maya's determination was fueled by the hope that her actions would not only hold Gerald accountable but also empower others who had been silenced. As the day of the event approached, tension mounted on both sides. Gerald, unaware of Maya's intentions, grew increasingly anxious. He sensed a shift in the atmosphere, whispers, glances, a subtle undercurrent of anticipation, but he couldn't pinpoint the cause. His usual arrogance masked a growing unease, and the cracks in his confidence began to show. Meanwhile, Maya remained composed, channeling her nervous energy into focus. She rehearsed her words, visualized the confrontation, and reminded herself of the strength that had carried her this far. The event itself was a glittering affair, filled with polished smiles and the hum of socializing. Maya arrived early, blending into the crowd while keeping a keen eye on Gerald. When the moment came, she stepped forward with purpose, her presence commanding attention. The room grew quiet as people sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. Maya addressed Gerald directly, her voice steady and clear. She recounted specific instances of his mistreatment not as accusations tossed into the air, but as undeniable truths backed by evidence and testimony. The impact was immediate. Gerald's usual defenses faltered under the weight of collective acknowledgement. He was forced to confront the person he had been, the arrogance that had blinded him, the prejudice that had fueled his actions, and the damage he had caused. The public nature of the confrontation left Gerald exposed, vulnerable in a way he had never been before. His peers, once impressed or intimidated by him, now witnessed his unraveling. The social currency that had bolstered his confidence evaporated, replaced by a collective demand for accountability. Maya's courage sparked murmurs of support around the room, and the atmosphere shifted from one of unease to empowerment. In that moment, Gerald faced a choice: to continue denying and deflecting, or to acknowledge the truth and begin to make amends. The chapter captures the raw intensity of this turning point, where pride clashes with reality, and the possibility of change hangs in the balance. Maya's unwavering stance serves as both a challenge and an invitation, a call for Gerald to recognize the consequences of his actions and the power she now wields. The confrontation marks more than just a personal victory for Maya. It symbolizes a breaking of silence, a reclaiming of power, and a redefinition of what it means to stand up against injustice. By forcing Gerald to acknowledge her strength and the harm he caused, Maya transforms the event from a simple gathering into a moment of reckoning. The chapter closes on the electric tension of that encounter, leaving readers with the understanding that while the ultimate confrontation has concluded, the journey toward true accountability and healing is just beginning. The event was a grand affair, filled with influential guests who had long admired Gerald's commanding presence and carefully curated image of authority. As the evening unfolded, a tension simmered beneath the polished veneer, a tension born from the unspoken truths Maya was ready to reveal. The room buzzed with anticipation, unaware of the storm about to break through the carefully maintained facade. When Maya stepped onto the stage, her demeanor was calm but resolute. She spoke with a clarity and conviction that immediately commanded attention. Without hesitation, she began to recount the ways Gerald had manipulated and mistreated not only her but others within their circle. Her voice did not waver as she detailed incidents of cruelty, deception, and abuse of power that had long been whispered about but never publicly confronted. The guests listened in stunned silence, the weight of Maya's words slowly sinking in. The image of Gerald they had held, a man of influence and control, began to fracture under the harsh light of truth. His calculated charm and commanding presence seemed to evaporate as the stories unfolded, revealing a man driven by arrogance and cruelty rather than strength or honor. Gerald's initial reaction was one of disbelief, followed quickly by anger. He attempted to interrupt, to deny, to discredit Maya's claims, but the room no longer responded to his bluster. The tide had turned, and the power he once wielded slipped through his fingers like sand. The air grew heavy with the realization that the man who had so long dominated the room was now vulnerable, exposed. In a moment that stunned everyone present, Gerald's demeanor shifted dramatically. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by desperation and regret. He dropped to his knees before Maya, a public display of submission that shattered the established power dynamic. His voice trembled as he begged for forgiveness, pleading for mercy from the woman he had wronged. The scene was raw and intense. Gerald's vulnerability was laid bare for all to see, and the guests watched as the man they once feared was reduced to a supplicant. Yet, despite his pleas, Maya remained unmoved. Her strength was unwavering, her resolve clear. She understood that true justice required more than forgiveness, it demanded accountability. Maya's refusal to grant comfort or absolution was a profound act of reclamation. She stood tall, no longer a victim but a victor who had taken control of her own narrative. The humiliation that Gerald faced was not just a consequence of his fall from grace but a symbol of the shift in power, the triumph of truth over tyranny. As Gerald knelt, stripped of his pride and authority, he finally confronted the magnitude of his misdeeds. The recognition of his wrongdoings was no longer abstract or hidden behind excuses, it was immediate and undeniable. The gravity of his actions settled heavily upon him, marking a turning point that would redefine both their lives. The guests remained silent, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. Some looked on with sympathy for Gerald's downfall, others with admiration for Maya's courage. The chapter captured the rawness of this confrontation, a collision of past wounds and present reckoning. As the event drew to a close, Maya walked away from Gerald's supplication with a sense of liberation and empowerment. The path ahead was uncertain, but she carried with her the hard-won dignity and self-worth that came from standing firm in the face of injustice. Gerald remained on his knees, a man broken by the truth he had long denied. This pivotal moment marked not just the end of a chapter in their lives but the beginning of a new era where power was no longer wielded through fear and control. Maya's act of courage and resolve had rewritten the rules, proving that standing for truth could dismantle even the most entrenched empires. Maya's departure from the Blake household marked a pivotal turning point in her life, symbolizing a break from a past defined by control, invisibility, and oppression. The walls that once confined her, both physically and emotionally, now lay behind her as she stepped into a future filled with possibilities. This new chapter was not just about leaving a toxic environment but about embracing the freedom to live authentically, to pursue her dreams, and to reclaim her identity on her own terms. Gerald's empire, once seemingly invincible, began to crumble under the weight of his misdeeds and the exposure brought about by Maya's courage. His power, which had intimidated and silenced many, eroded quickly as the truth came to light. The downfall was not only professional but personal, forcing Gerald to confront a reality far removed from the dominance he once wielded effortlessly. Left to rebuild his life without the veneer of control, he faced the consequences of his actions, a stark contrast to Maya's ascending trajectory. Maya's journey forward was marked by healing and growth, processes that demanded patience, self-reflection, and unwavering determination. Having endured years of marginalization and suppression, she now focused on nurturing her inner strength and rebuilding her confidence. This healing was not linear or easy. It involved confronting lingering fears, dismantling self-doubt, and learning to trust in her own voice. Each step she took forward was a reclaiming of power, a testament to her resilience in the face of systemic oppression. The newfound freedom Maya experienced allowed her to explore her passions and talents in ways that were previously unimaginable. No longer constrained by the expectations and limitations imposed by the Blake household and Gerald's dominance, she pursued opportunities that aligned with her true self. Whether it was education, creative expression, or community involvement, Maya embraced each avenue with enthusiasm and purpose, determined to build a life rooted in authenticity and empowerment. Her journey was also a profound act of defiance against the oppressive systems that had sought to keep her and others like her invisible and voiceless. By standing up to Gerald and exposing the truth, Maya not only changed her own fate but ignited a ripple effect that challenged entrenched power dynamics. Her courage inspired others to question authority and to recognize their own worth and potential. In this way, Maya became more than an individual survivor, she became a symbol of collective resistance and hope. Throughout this transformation, Maya cultivated a deep sense of self-awareness and compassion. She learned to honor her experiences without being defined by them, integrating the pain and triumphs of her past into a holistic sense of identity. This self-acceptance was crucial in building the peace and confidence that now characterized her life. She no longer measured her value through the lens of others' perceptions but through her own understanding of her strengths and aspirations. Maya's story is also one of redefining success. Moving away from traditional metrics such as wealth, status, or external validation, she found fulfillment in personal growth, meaningful relationships, and the ability to live truthfully. Her success became a reflection of resilience, integrity, and the courage to forge a new path. This redefinition resonated deeply, offering a powerful counter-narrative to the often narrow definitions imposed by society. As Maya settled into this new phase, she also became actively involved in efforts to support others who faced similar struggles. Drawing from her experiences, she engaged in advocacy, mentorship, and community-building activities that fostered empowerment and solidarity. Her voice carried the weight of lived experience, making her a powerful advocate for justice and change. Through this work, Maya extended her impact beyond her personal journey, contributing to a broader movement for equity and human dignity. The chapter paints a vivid picture of Maya in moments of quiet reflection and purposeful action. She finds solace in simple pleasures, whether it's a walk in nature, time spent with loved ones, or moments of creative expression. These instances of peace underscore the depth of her transformation and the balance she has achieved between honoring her past and embracing the future. In the closing scenes, Maya is depicted in a space of calm and contentment, a stark contrast to the turmoil that once engulfed her. She understands that while challenges remain, she now possesses the tools and mindset to navigate them with grace and resilience. The freedom she has claimed is not just physical but spiritual and emotional, allowing her to live fully and with intention. Maya's story ends not with finality but with the promise of ongoing growth and impact. She stands as a testament to the power of one individual to confront injustice, to heal, and to inspire change. Her legacy is one of courage, resilience, and the unwavering belief that no one is truly invisible when they dare to stand up and be seen. This resolution offers a hopeful vision of what is possible when oppressive systems are challenged and dismantled. It affirms that change begins with those who have the courage to break free from their constraints and to envision a better, more just world. Maya's journey is a beacon for anyone who has ever felt marginalized, reminding them that their voice and their actions matter profoundly. In embracing her new beginning, Maya embodies the essence of transformation not as a solitary achievement but as a catalyst for collective empowerment. Her life is a powerful reminder that healing and growth are continuous processes, enriched by courage, community, and the unyielding pursuit of truth and freedom.